Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. This is Annika Jackson with Your Brand Amplified, and I am thrilled today to have a guest who moved from the world of finance to business development, banking, to online education, and into marriage and family therapy, and is doing a lot to drive change for the world and help us really get in touch with who we are, how to move through the world, and how to solve issues in interpersonal relationships. So while this conversation has a lot to do with personal relationships, I believe it has so much implication for every kind of relationship we have. So Figs O'Sullivan of Empathy, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Yes. So I would love to unpack your journey a little bit because as I was doing my research, I was seeing all of these different companies and organizations you've worked for. And I would love to find out what was the pinnacle moment that made you realize that you wanted to be a therapist.
It's a great question. It was interesting just hearing you name all the different professions I had. It's kind of still shocking to me in some ways, right? My journey. But I actually think I knew at a pretty early age that being a therapist was the right vocation for me. But I definitely had a lot of shame as a kid growing up. I felt a lot of shame. And so, I was from a working class income family, but was sent to private school. Very lucky that I was sent to private school. But I always felt ashamed financially, like status, like growing up in Dublin, people ask you which high school you went to and they can peg you, right, by the school, what sports you play, your accent, right? So you get pegged socially very quickly. And so due to that kind of shame inside of myself, right, I really believed I should go into a career that I make money first. So I'd love to say that my path to being a stockbroker, doing business development was inspiration-based, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was really delaying. I just didn't believe that I could do what I loved and wanted to, like dedicate myself to it and be okay financially.
That's such a common issue, I think. So many of us are told or believe because of growing up around certain people or seeing what success looks like to other people that we have to move through the world in a certain way. And it's interesting when you take away those constructs, right? What beautiful thing can evolve out of it, which seems like that's what happened with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was very fortunate that, working in financial services, I did make enough money to have a little bit of freedom in my mid-30s. And I went and lived at a place called Esalen. And Esalen is a retreat center in the wilderness in California, in Big Sur, California. And I got to live there for 18 months and just work on self-improvement and learn from all the greatest teachers in the, psychotherapy, self-improvement world. They all come through Esalen. And that was really the launching pad. I think of Esalen as almost like a third parent, where I kind of then made that transition to, I lost faith. I went back into business development after Esalen, but it was everything I learned there. I had some false launches into being a therapist. And in the end, I actually, to make the transition, I did a program where I could still work and do the program on the weekends. So it definitely was not easy for me. It was still really hard to trust the transition to giving up a job that was more focused on making money for financial security, right? Yeah, just one of my fears, right? But once I started sitting with people as a therapist, it was just, I loved it. It was amazing. By the way, the other thing, if it's okay to say about that, the thing that really fascinated with me, and I love this lesson for myself, it might be valuable for some of your listeners and viewers, is I actually felt richer in a job, a career that didn't have the same earnings potential because my time frame expanded. Because when I was working in financial services and in business development, right, I was always working for the liquidity event. Right? I had this short time frame, right? But all of a sudden, it was amazing just to feel like once I was doing work that I really loved, it was incredible. Like I never was going to make as much money as I was going to make as a corporate client group director at Citigroup, in the brokerage arm. But I always was like, okay, I'm 2 years away from giving this up. And so I always felt poor, right? Whereas now, like being a therapist, I just love it so much, right? By the way, I'm picking my dad up at the airport today. He's 79 and a therapist, still seeing clients, loves it. And I really see myself that as long as I have my faculties, I'll be a therapist, as long as I can. Hopefully, as long as my dad is, I'll be in my 80s and still working.
That's really beautiful. So in some ways, you knew that you wanted to follow your father's footsteps, but you rejected that construct to go into the other success modes that we see from the outside world, the financial.
Exactly. And by the way, look, my sister's a therapist, my mother's a therapist, my dad's a therapist. So it's fun. It's rare. I was the black sheep by trying not to be a therapist.
Wow. That is not something you hear very often.
I know.
Right?
Exactly. So... it's an interesting one as well, because, when you look at the journey to become a therapist, it's a big commitment, right? It's a 6-year from school to getting 3,000 hours. And it really wasn't until my mid-30s when I went, look, when I think the first time I ever looked at a doctorate program in psychology, I was 21 years old. And then, it takes it, you go through, let's say I went through 2 6-year periods to go, well, wait a second, I'm still looking at this. I might as well do it. It really was that oh my God, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. I'm getting tired of myself considering it, but never jumping. And then, of course, I found a way to I'm a good, hedger, always a plan B. So, I kept working, got to pay for school as I go, as opposed to take loans and,
Yeah. Well, I'm drawing some parallels to my own story by hearing you talk about this, because my father was a teacher, was a professor. My mom came from Thailand to the United States to get a teaching credential and go back and run my grandmother's private school. So we had entrepreneurs and teachers, professors, and then, and social workers. And I could never figure out where I landed in that construct. Mm-hmm. And now I am teaching university. And I'm going back to school to get more education. And I'm looking at my job, which I think is a fantastic job, but going, you know what, that's not the be all and all. I really am in love with being a teacher and create those aha moments for other people. And so I'm in 2024 decreasing my other work, even though it's financially better, to do these other things that really will help me feel so fulfilled. So I think that's such an important lesson for people to learn. And I'm, in my last year of my 40s and just really getting to this point. So I'm hoping that the majority of the people listening will think about this and our journeys and how they can get to that point earlier in their lives, perhaps.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Good for you, right? Good for you. That's brilliant. And look, I should say, it turned out that all of those journeys, all those kind of could have looked like missteps, or you should have become a therapist immediately. But I learned so much from being a stockbroker, right? Yeah. So much, right? And I did love, and I still love economics. Macro, I spend more time in my free time consuming content about, the economy and macroeconomics and rugby. That's my, but learning sales technique, when I was a stockbroker, being taught how to sell things, they'd hire actors when we'd have to actually role play with actors and be videoed in the early 90s. It was pretty amazing to get all of that actual training. And then obviously learning how to do business development, put deals together. Lo and behold, here I am now, a therapist, but I managed to put all of those entrepreneurial, sales, business development skills together and create a company and get to do it doing something that I personally love the time being a therapist. I still work in the business, not just on the business, because I love working in the business. But I got to, put all of those skills I developed together in a way that I have actually, and this is not a boast, I just want to I always think I'm a poster boy. It did actually all work out financially, better than I could ever have imagined. So yeah, it's amazing how it all has worked out, even though it seemed like a roundabout way to get there.
Yeah, exactly. Now, so you moved from Dublin to the US. Was that for university? Was that for employment?
Well, when I left Ireland in the mid-90s, there was 20-something% unemployment. My graduating class from Trinity College, Dublin, I don't know one person that stayed in Ireland.
Wow.
We all left, whether it was London, New York, San Francisco, where I went, Paris, Sydney, everybody left, right? And I happened to have met an American girl, still good dear friend, on Catalina Island, which I was working on for a summer. And she had a job in San Francisco, and I moved to San Francisco to be with her. So that was really how San Francisco came about. And then, of course, what we used to say in the 90s as Irish immigrants is that the biggest problem with moving to San Francisco is you won't go anywhere else. Oh. Right? Because it was wonderful. It was an amazing place, to be a young adult.
Yes. Yeah, I did a short stint in San Francisco myself, but more in the late 90s, early aughts.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very special time with all the energy. So now let's talk a little bit more about empathy and how you created the brand Empathy. Where did you start? Because I know that you did work as a therapist for other organizations. Yeah. What prompted you to start your own company, and what holes did you see? Because I know that you also have specialties and the way that you work.
Yeah, well, I mean, empathy really just grew like a weed, right? It just grew organically, in the sense that I became a therapist. I wanted to be really good as a therapist. I still had that fear financially, so I would see as many clients as I could while I was a trainee, before I was licensed, during the day, and then I'd fall asleep on the computer at night, building the website, doing marketing. I was really driven. I used to drive other therapists a bit mad, I think. They're a little overwhelmed with someone with that level of energy and drive and intensity towards building a business, right? So yeah, look, I really wanted, even before I was licensed, I started on my own, right? In my own private business, and realized that I wasn't as good at couples therapy, which I just always was into. I loved couples therapy. I just knew that I could be better. And so I learned how to be a really, really good couples therapist. And then, of course, just being really good at what you do, it comes back to you, right? So I then was in the natural situation where more people were reaching out to me that I could see. I didn't want to put a business together. So I'm asking friends, hey, can I teach you this thing I do? I don't want to just send these people to anyone, because they reached out to me. So I told a couple of friends. My wife was a therapist. She was into learning the same thing. I taught her how to do it. So for a number of years, it was literally, I just had a couple of friends and my wife where I taught them how to do it. And we just put everything together in a spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. And I mean, this is how... And then another good friend of mine set up a VA company for therapists. And this is what I told him: listen, I do not want to set up a group psychotherapy practice. No interest. But I will be your first client if you set up properly, the whole back office admin of a group practice. And so then, basically, look, it's still it's a small business, right? We've 20 therapists. And we built an app for couples and courses. We have a podcast and but all of those things have just been taking the next natural step, given that people resonate with the message and they want to see us. And I can't create more time. So the next best thing I know how to do is make sure that other people are trained and we have info products and stuff to help people that I or my wife can't see ourselves.
Yeah. And this is really important what you just said, because it's something that every entrepreneur needs to think about. You start at one place, whether you are very intentional about the exact way that you want your business to look, which often will be a little different probably in reality than what you put on paper, or like yourself, or even with my business, it also grew very organically. And it kind of made me go, okay, this is where I really need to focus my attention, or I need to make sure we're doing this, this, and this. And thinking about what's the next thing that you can do to continue adding value, helping serve the people who really need it. But as you said, not just giving up all of your time in a day.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And look, so many of the things we tried, they didn't work.
Sure.
So a big when I say they didn't work, right? I think one of the things one has to be comfortable with as a business owner is just trying loads of things, right? Like different marketing stuff, like building different products. You know, one of the analogies, look, we create and sell chocolate, right? Like couples counseling, relationship advice. And we've tried packaging relationship guidance in many different wrappers, right? But we're very lucky. A lot of branding has been done for us. Couples counseling.
Yeah.
Like we didn't have to create oh, I just had a fight with my spouse or partner. What do I do? People know, oh, should we go to marriage or couples counseling? So that has been the easy part, just like, being good at that and getting ourselves in front of people that are looking for what they already know. What has been an ongoing journey is trying to see, how do we repackage the way people get delivered the relationship guidance in something that isn't actually selling by the hour couples counseling.
Yeah.
Right. And that's been a lot of trial and error.
That's an interesting challenge. And having gone to marriage therapy myself and then eventually getting divorced, I can see how it can be very valuable to think of things in a different way rather than the standard, because the standard doesn't necessarily work for everybody, depending on where you are in your relationship, where you are with time, just all of the different components. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your approach, because I know some of the things that you talk about we tend to have the same fights about the same things. And you have a narrative called the Waltz of Pain. Yeah.
Well, our work is primarily based on attachment theory, which is the best theory we have of what love is. And in short, it's just that we all need to be emotionally bonded from the cradle to the grave. It's hardwired in. And so when you're in a relationship, you get emotionally threatened when you're disconnected from your partner, and you react in ways to try and protect yourself or protest being disconnected. But unfortunately, the way you protest or react when you're disconnected actually threatens your partner or spouse, because now they perceive you as withholding a flavor of love from them. Yeah. And then, of course, they now react in a way to protect themselves, right? Or protest the lack of love or disconnect, or the disconnection they're feeling. And then so that couple then reaffirm their worst fears and stories of each other. And so they have more reason to double down on the way they protect themselves or protest the pain they're in. And so the couple then collude with each other unwittingly, it's tragic, to make things worse. So one way to describe that is what we call the waltz of pain. And this might be a little bit more complicated than necessary on the show, but I'll tell you what the waltz of pain is. This is just the reactive part, what people see of each other. Underneath, they're both hurting because they love each other, right? And they're actually very lovable inside. But on the surface, what they're actually showing in their behavior, a couple, is they're each doing three things. If you remember a waltz, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And the three things are, each of them has a negative perception of the other person. They have a reactive emotion, not a vulnerable, soft, I'm sad, I'm powerless, I'm helpless. A reactive emotion has a because of you. I'm angry because of you. I'm frustrated by you. You disappoint me, right? And then they take an action that is informed by their negative perception and their reactive emotion. So now they're either going to withdraw from the person, argue with the person, give advice to the person. And then, of course, that is going to draw from their partner, 1, 2, 3, a negative perception of you, right? A reactive emotion. They're going to be frustrated with you, disappointed in you, confused by you, mad at you. And now their action in response to you will be born out of that. They'll argue back. They'll go to the pub. They'll call their granny and get confirmation how terrible you are, right? And then, of course, you'll do another version of your 1, 2, 3. I was right about them. They really are so annoying. And I'm going to yell at them some more. Which, of course, they'll see you look at the way they're always too much. They are so annoying. And then they'll I'm definitely not talking to them anytime soon. So together, the two people dance the waltz of pain, right? And it's very sad. And so that's the key, by the way. The key is to see the waltz of pain from the outside. Instead of it being a me or a you problem, it's actually look at what we are both creating together. This is an us problem, not a me or a you problem.
Right. And that's the hard part, right? How do you go from being in the dance to being able to objectively observe that this is something that we have to solve together and that we're both...
Yeah. Well, that's what I do, right?
Exactly.
That's it, right? So I'm on the outside and I show the people what it is they're really feeling inside and what they're doing, how it lands on the partner, what the partner then is doing in response, and then the impact it has on the first partner. And then I show them that in a way that over time elicits empathy and compassion. And I call it empathy squared. Empathy for ourselves, the other person, at the same time with both people, right? So it's an all-directional empathy. Most people are familiar with one-directional empathy. One person's hurting, they tell the other person, oh, your poor knee, it must really hurt. Well, thank you, right? But that's just one direction. But imagine that in both directions at the same time. So that's the key transformational first experience we have to have, where both of them come in to see me. They're like, you're always complaining. Yeah, well, you never show up, right? And then I help them both feel empathy for themselves and each other in the same moment through putting together this one system narrative, the narrative of what they're co-creating with each other. And this is a big leap as a human being, that you can go from your I consciousness story to seeing the we story. So yeah, that's it. And it's very hard when you're a part of a system. If you're a tree in a 2-tree woods, you can't see the woods and feel sad for the woods. And so that's what I do, right?
Yeah.
I actually help the two people feel sad, not just for their individual tree. No, but their branches keep hitting me. Yeah, but their roots are encroaching on mine, right? I actually look, oh my God, look how sad this is for the woods. The woods are in a lot of pain. And if I can get them to live in that moment of feeling sad together, and this is weird, most people want to connect in a good place, but the most important first place I have to help them connect is in the sad, painful place, but as a shared sad place. Now they're together, and now we can work together to make it better.
Fantastic. And you use some different techniques, so including, improvisational dance and theater, experiential psychotherapy, EFT. You try to bring some fun and levity to this very painful process that can help.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Look, I have a compulsion to be funny, right? I really do. So I have no choice. It's not, the way, I don't know if you've ever heard, only the jester can speak truth to the king. Anyone else that speaks the truth to the king leaves the court with their head on a plate, right? Their body goes one way, their head goes another, right? So only the jester can actually tell the king what's really happening. So I use a lot of humor. I use a lot of exaggeration, right? Because again, it's easier for people to see the truth of themselves and what they're co-creating through exaggeration than if you showed it to an exact one-for-one mirror. So yeah, humor, exaggeration is really, really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, to help people de-escalate.
Right. I can see that would be effective.
Yeah. Look, I get away with murder. When I say I get away with murder, the way in which I reflect back to people what they're doing. In Ireland, people wouldn't put up with me because they're used to other Irish people being witty and charming and, funny. But luckily, I decided to be a therapist in America where people put up with me reflecting them in wild ways, like showing them themselves in ways that are funny and exaggerated.
Yeah. A good banter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Which is something that I think a lot of people in the US don't think about in those terms.
Yeah, well, it's
interesting. They get more caught up and like judgy. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. You know, the way, like, when I came to America, I was really fascinated with this, you know, the presidential elections, and they talk about, like, but who would you go for a beer with? This is like,
oh, yeah.
And it's actually very similar in a way as a therapist, right? A lot of therapists, right? Like, they're really like, you know, oh, very deep. Tell me about your feelings, right? But I always look at, you have to earn the right to talk to people like that. So like, let's say that's like a conversation. You got to be able to have conversations with people. I'm not religious, but like in a cathedral, like really holy and sacred. But in order to earn the right to have really deep, vulnerable conversations with the deepest, most vulnerable place in people, you got to be able to have pub conversations with people first. You got to be able to be like, you know, that you're fun, that you get the person, or you got to be a bit of a chameleon that you can change depending on who it is you're talking to and get along with them where they're like, I would totally go for a beer or a coffee or like decaffeinated tea with you, right? And then through that connection and relationship, now we can go like into the deeper, more vulnerable places and integrate the learnings and, you know, cry and have tissues, snot and hug and love each other, and then come back out and enjoy, you know, the conversations in the coffee shop again.
Right. What would you say, just one or two pieces of advice for anybody who's looking at changing the way that they move through their relationships?
Yeah. Well, the first is it's always a system, right? It's always both of you. If you're hurting, they're hurting, right? If you see them reacting, you're reacting. So it's always a system. It's always both of you. That's the first thing. That's good. That's for a lot of your listeners. They're already off. They're already like, why did I waste my time? Right. The other one is, right, I guarantee you listening, you already have a postdoctorate level of education in the problems of your partner or spouse. Give yourself a round of applause and stop studying it. Nothing new for you to learn.
I love
Two
that.
other things to do instead. One, take your flashlight of awareness off your favorite topic of study, which is the problems of your partner, and point that flashlight of awareness back on yourself. What is it that I do? What is it that I feel that would mean I co-create this connection in relationship? So the one is, what do I do? And then the second one that's useful is, again, what is the system that I am co-creating?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, what does 2024 and beyond look like for you and for empathy?
Good question. Well, you know, my wife and I have taken a little break from doing podcast episodes, but we've gotten like, well, you know, just really good feedback on the episodes. So we're really committed to like recording again. You know, we're parents and, you know, working and ocean canoers, like, but we have to find the time to record episodes together. So that's a big one. And then the other thing is I'm excited that we're working on is we're going to start offering in-person intensives. Like since the pandemic, everything we do is over Zoom, which is great. And it's worked unbelievably well. But I'm excited to go back to kind of my roots, the Esalen roots of doing like really deep in-person work over a number of days. This is really kind of where I started doing like in-person deep emotional transformation work. And so we're in the process of putting that together. We're going to start having people come to Hawaii or do it online and spend longer time with us. You know, they're the two big projects, you know, we're working on.
Fantastic. And I actually realized I didn't ask this question, but I'm curious. I'd love to hear about a couple that you worked with, if you're willing to share a story of that aha transformation. And I know not every story is going to end with well, staying together, right? But I'd love to hear some stories from you if you are open to sharing.
Yeah, I mean, look, as a therapist, I have to be very careful. I can't really share about anybody's. But,
exactly.
But look, it's not uncommon. The typical journey, right, is a couple comes to see me. And like I said, both of them are the world's renowned experts on the problems of their partner. They both have really great ideas about how we could make things better, which usually starts with the other person should change in these ways.
Yeah.
And able to take that couple, right? And by the way, the research is clear, right? We can do this like 73% of the time. Those that do emotionally focused couples therapy, right, the backbone of the actual interventions we use, get better and stay better. When we go back to them 2 years later, they've maintained their gains, right? Yeah. So basically able to take their two individual subjective stories, hear them, validate them, integrate it into a shared story where they actually now can de-escalate and feel like they're a team. And then from we're a team can help them now, because it's safe to do it, access their deepest, most vulnerable feelings and ask for their needs to be met. And because they're no longer looking like a dragon or a stone, like a fierce dragon or an emotionless stone to their partner now feels safe to show up and give them the love they need. We do that in both directions, where they're just holding each other and loving each other. And then we can do the third part of the work, where now we can deepen that connection and look back and look how amazing our connection and relationship is. And then we say goodbye, where now they can meet any issue that life throws their way, knowing exactly how to handle it. I know it sounds crazy, but we can do that over and over and over and over and over again, right? Obviously, it doesn't always work. The hardest part is the first part. Like I said, most people are going to be quite set in. Thank you very much. Sure, it's an us problem, but can we get back to talking about the problems of my partner, right? And some people won't ever be able to get off that train. So as I always say, getting to it's a system story, it's both of us, and it de-escalates both people, right? That is actually the hardest part. If we can get that part down, right, the first third of the journey sometimes takes the longest time, then everything else is actually quite easy.
Fantastic. And Figs, is the easiest place for people to learn more your website?
Yeah. The website, empathy with an I in the end, not a Y in the end.com. And then, of course, all our social media is empathy with an I in the end, not a Y in the end, now, NOW, like at all the different channels.
Awesome.
That's it.
And I understand that we do have a special that I'll be putting in the show notes and sharing with our audience for the masterclass.
Oh, great.
With a 25% off code.
Yeah.
25. So I'll link that as well.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. The course, we put together this whole course so you can do everything on your own. You don't, if you don't want to do counseling, you're not ready for it. We don't have the time, finances. We put together a do-it-yourself course, and we put our hearts and souls in it, and
awesome.
Seems to help.
Yeah. Is there a favorite quote or mantra that you live by?
Well, I really like the Rumi quote, out beyond right doing and wrong doing, there's a field, I'll meet you there. That's what I'm that place out beyond wrongdoing and right doing, and I'll meet both of you there and make it safe for both of you.
What a wonderful construct. I can see it. I can visualize it. And Figs, I really appreciate you coming on and having this conversation. We covered a lot of different things, from therapy to your life and being an entrepreneur in this space. And I know there's a lot of good nuggets here. I'm walking away feeling very peaceful. So you bring a lot of amazing energy.
Oh, thank you.
Show. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And thanks for having me on. It was lovely meeting you.
Likewise. And you live in Kauai, which is one of the places on my list to go back to, because it's such a beautiful place. And I can't imagine a better place for you to do the kind of work that you're doing.
It's amazing. So lucky.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. And thank you to the listeners and people viewing the show for coming to another episode. I know that there were a lot of great tidbits that I'm taking away from Figs and empathy. And I know that you are too. So with that, I'll be back again in a few days with another amazing expert to share some tips and tricks on how we can all live our lives a little bit better, whether in our personal lives and personal journeys or our work life, or live it at both. Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.